Welcome back to the channel, you Kurd nerds. As many of y'all might know, or you don't know, I am a veteran. I was a infantry before I flew airplanes, and many people have asked, how did I use my GI Bill to pay for my flight training? There's a couple rumors out there saying that, oh, well, it won't pay for private pilot. It'll only pay for CFI. It'll only pay for commercial. You'll only get $16,000 a year. And all of these aren't necessarily wrong, but if you go about it the right way, if you go about it the way that I went about it, you can get all the way up to CFI, CFII, or even multi-engine instructor all on your GI Bill while getting a housing allowance and having nothing or almost nothing out of pocket. So let's get into it. Now, as a veteran, if you are going to use your GI Bill for any training, whether it be flight training, college, plumbing, uh, law degree, medical school, or underwater basket weaving, you're going to need a certificate of eligibility. Now, a certificate of eligibility really just proves that you met the requirements and you are eligible to receive a post 9/11 or Montgomery GI Bill. We're only going to be talking about a post 9/11 GI Bill today because the Montgomery GI Bill is pretty old, and I'm assuming most of y'all have opted into the post 9/11 GI Bill, given that it offers like a housing stipend, book coverage, and it'll pretty much pay for all of your training as long as it's part of a college program. So you're going to go to va.gov/education/eligibility. Look down below. I'll try to have the links down there, or I'll try to put them like up here or something like that. Okay. But they'll be around here. Now, on this website, it's just going to ask you, like, hey, do you meet the requirements? And then you're going to scroll down here to the bottom and you're going to click apply for education benefits. You'll be applying for new benefits unless you've already gone to school. If you've already gotten some kind of training, you've already started some kind of degree plan, you're going to be applying for new benefits. Or if you are changing your degree plan, if you're, in like accounting right now and you're like, this is boring, why did I sign up for this? You'll click updating my training plan and changing over to be a pilot, because being a pilot is a whole lot cooler than being an accountant. And of course, are you a veteran? Yes or no? You're not going to be applying through the employment through technology education, blah, blah, blah. You are going to be applying for the post 9/11 GI Bill. Now, I'm not going to go all the way through this because I don't have any GI Bill left. I have burnt all of it on flight training, and I have gotten all the way up to my multi-engine instructor, all on the GI Bill. So once you get your certificate of eligibility, it's time to pick a school. So how do you pick a school when it comes to using your GI Bill? You want to make sure that you find a school with a good training program. My course of action, the way I went through all of this was I had some hiccups. There were some learning curves. There were some mistakes. Okay. My initial school of choice was actually UND, the University of North Dakota, until I found a website that's no longer around called UNDsucks.com. This was a website purely dedicated to a salty individual that wanted to just talk crap about the University of North Dakota. I'm assuming because they just struggled in flight training, didn't pass their check rides, didn't pass their stage checks, and now they're 100 grand in debt because they just kept trying to pay for a career that they weren't really successful at. But given that me as a student pilot didn't know anything about flight training, I thought if someone's willing to pay whatever it costs to keep a website up to let other people know or warn other people about the quality of a flight school, there must be something to it. No, that was just a salty individual. UND is a great school. I definitely recommend it. But because of that website, I said, oh, I'll go to Arizona State University, because at the time, the Veterans Affairs Administration, or Veterans Affairs Administration, I don't know why I said that twice, but either way, they were cutting them blank checks. This was back way almost a decade ago, where the VA just didn't really have a whole lot of oversight when it came to flight training when it was part of a college program. There was actually a flight school up in, I think it was southern Utah, that they charged $500,000 to the Veterans Affairs Administration for a private pilot certificate because they did it in a turbine helicopter. They did it in a news chopper. And the VA got that bill and they went, the fuck is going on here? We got to figure something out. So the way the story was broken down to me is the VA called UND and said, hey, UND, how much is your flight training program? And UND was like, oh, it's about 120, 140, about a 120, 140. And the VA, he's like, "Oh, for private pilot, that's really cheap. How do you keep it so cheap for private pilot?" And they went, "Oh no, no, no. That's that's the whole thing. What do you mean just $120,000 for a private pilot?" And the VA went, "Oh, we fucked up. We fucked up." So they started looking into a bunch of other flight schools. They cut off that one flight school that's charged $500,000 for a private pilot certificate because uh obviously that's fraud. And then they asked UND for a bit more detail, and UND was like, "Hey, this is the average that we charge, and this is what we advertise to our students, saying this is the average cost it's going to cost you to accomplish X, Y, and Z course: private pilot, commercial, instrument, multi engine, CFI, CFII, multi engine instructor, etc." And the VA went to ASU and said, "Hey, ASU, we're kind of cutting you blank checks right now, and it's costing us a lot of money. We need to know the average cost of what it takes to accomplish these courses." Because at the time, ASU was cutting the veterans blank checks. There was people graduating Arizona State University's flight training program with 1,500 hours because they would just bill the VA for solo time, because there was lessons attributed to solo time in every training program. In every course there was lessons attributed to solo time building, so the veterans and the school were just billing it as a solo flight lesson, and they were going off and building flight time with their buddies. They were flying to California and getting sushi. They were flying to Texas and watching football games. They were doing all kinds of fun stuff. And the VA eventually was like, "Hey, ASU, no, we can't do that anymore." And ASU's like, "Hey, we train to proficiency. We don't train to numbers. So you're going to continue to pay us." And the VA said, "Haha, we let people die on waiting lists. No, you're either going to meet our standards or we're not going to pay you anymore." And then um, they did exactly that. The VA cut off funding to Arizona State University, and Arizona State University decided to let all the veterans know, including me, 3 days before the semester started, that we were going to have to find other funding to pay for our flight training. I had sold most of my property, left my entire life where it was to move to Arizona to go to this flight training program. And now, 3 days before the start of the semester, ASU's like, "Sucks to suck, go find some money." And I actually called a couple places looking for like loans, and they laughed. Like, they thought it was a joke. Like, the loan officer thought I was making a crappy joke about needing, the amount of money. I think I was asking for something like $100,000 to pay for this flight training, because I'm like, well, sunk cost. Let's just continue on, until I found that UND, yeah, the one school that I was talking about earlier, had actually partnered with a community college right next door, Chandler Gilbert Community College, um, with their flight training program that was still getting paid for by the VA because it was UND's program. And the VA had approved UND's program because they were paying for the average. Now, keep that in mind when you go to UND, because again, that's what I'm recommending. If you go to UND, the VA is going to pay for the average cost of that flight training program. If you need more than that, it's going to be out of your pocket. So I went to ASU for one semester because a bunch of veterans threatened to go to the news, and ASU said, "Hey, hey, 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 don't do that. If y'all shut up and don't say anything, we'll pay for a semester so that you guys can find other funding." So I hung out at ASU for a semester. I got I got like 80 hours of private pilot training because I couldn't figure out how to do a short field landing to save my life. Um, and then I went to UND, or I went to Chandler Gilbert Community College in partnership with UND Aerospace Foundation right next door. It was literally at the same airport. Like, I saw UND's airplanes at the airport while I was at ASU in partnership with ATP. And then when I jumped over to UND, I was, you know what I mean? So to continue on. Now, let's get back to that. They'll only pay for the average. They won't pay anymore. You will be paying out of pocket, or you will just take a failure on the lab if you require more training. So I started private pilot, and there was another individual that started private pilot with me. They burned their entire GI Bill working on private pilot because they just kept taking the fail and retaking the course. Do I recommend this? No, obviously not. But unless you're able or willing to pay for a couple extra flight lessons, you're going to have to take the fail if you need more training. Sucks. Their GPA was pretty low given that they kept taking the fail. But once I got to Chandler Gilbert Community College in partnership with UND, it was smooth sailing from then on out. I think I needed a couple extra dollars, maybe another 1,000 or two, to finish up. I think it was, oh, what might it have been? Maybe it was multi-engine. Yeah, it was multi-engine. It was my multi-engine rating. I needed like 2,000 extra dollars. So I had some savings from working a job along with receiving my housing benefits, my BAH that the post 9/11 GI Bill offers, and I used that to pay for the gaps, the extra bit of training that I needed. Now, beyond Chandler Gilbert Community College, I have then gone on to get my CFII, which was actually paid for by UND Aerospace Foundation. I signed a training contract with them a year. It required me to stay there for a year, and they would pay for my CFII. Beyond that, I went to a local place up here in Wisconsin. I'm not going to name them because I don't recommend them. But since they're local, I don't really want to badmouth them and step on toes. But I got my multi-engine instructor from a local place up here. And then my type ratings, I've all gotten as part of airline training. And my airplane single engine C was paid for out of pocket. Now, if you end up going through Chandler Gilbert Community College program, their associate's degree, remember, you get 36 months of GI Bill. This associate's degree, I accomplished it in 18 months, meaning I had another 18 months of GI Bill. And that's how I paid for my multi-engine instructor rating, and then like one or two other courses here and there. But if you end up with extra GI Bill, what you can do is actually use it for type ratings. Now, you're going to learn what type ratings are later on in your training. It's really just a special license specifically for an airplane. And you can look up exactly what a type rating is later, but we're not focused on that. But if you do want to get a type rating after the fact, the post 9/11 GI Bill will pay up to $16,535.46 a year for extra flight training that's not necessarily part of a collegiate program. So I believe at my job where I teach in the full motion sim, we don't take the GI Bill, but we do charge about $15,000 for an A320 type rating. So if we did take the GI Bill, it would cover a type rating in the Airbus A320. And given how hiring is kind of slowed down and you got to be a little bit more competitive to get picked up even by a regional nowadays, it might help. So just keep that in mind. Don't burn through your entire GI Bill as soon as you finish your primary flight training, your private pilot, commercial, instrument, multi-engine, CFI. Save a little bit if you want to get a nice type rating. But that's how I used my GI Bill. I wouldn't recommend using your post 9/11 GI Bill as part of just a random Part 61 school, because that's all that they will pay is that $16,000. And private pilot on average costs people around $17,000. And that $16,000 is a whole year of GI Bill. You give up a whole year for maybe accomplishing your private pilot certificate. But if you go through somewhere like UND, I think OSU, and a couple other big schools, take the GI Bill and it'll cover the entire thing. Now, if you go somewhere like Embry-Riddle is technically a private school, and there is the yellow ribbon program that can try to cover some of the gaps. But given that Embry-Riddle is a private school, the GI Bill does only pay up to $28,937.09 a year for a private school. So if you've got any other questions about how I used my GI Bill, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments. But if this is how you used your GI Bill, or if you had a different experience using your GI Bill for flight training, please let me know. This is just my personal story, and I hope it helps you figure out your transition out of the military.